If you want to have the best experience watching this video, I strongly suggest you start with my previous video on Little Nightmares. It will give what you see here a lot more depth and meaning. Let's talk about the DLC, especially what makes a good DLC. For starters, I think it's important that the base material the developers want to expand upon is fully fledged and can stand on its own, whereas a DLC is entirely codependent on the original game and only adds additional content that you can live without. A good DLC, in my opinion, expands on an underdeveloped part of a game and adds new gameplay, new visual, as well as tells some new stories in the same world. It has to be distinctive enough so it doesn't feel like leftover content from the base game, but also it cannot be too out there so it doesn't feel completely different from the original. It's a difficult task, so let's see how Little Nightmare does it and if it's any good at all. The Depths is the first in a series of 3 DLCs released for Little Nightmares, in what is also called on the internet The Secrets of the Maw. It is clear from the very first thing we see that the story of our new character is meant to somewhat mirror 6's with some strong parallels from the very beginning. A young boy swims aimlessly in deep sea. Yeah, he's got a teapot on his head. I wanted to spice this video up a little. Sue me. When he's suddenly pulled under the water by some creature. Before we get to see what happens, we wake up. Now this is the runaway kid, the main protagonist of this DLC and the other 2 that we'll mention in other videos. This is the first difference from the main game. In this chapter, we never see 6. What we'll be experiencing in a moment is a standalone story that ties in with the main game, but takes place in a separate time with a new character. We wake up in a familiar place. Those of you who remember the first game know that we are in the lair right before seeing the janitor for the very first time. We can actually even see him grabbing a kid on the floor below. This immediately tells us something new and adds and expands what we know about the world. The janitor doesn't kill the children, he just puts them back in bed. But really, we don't want to be caught by him either way. While in 6's story we moved from left to right, the runaway kid is going backwards, at least for now, and we see some of the rooms in a slightly new light. For example, in the original, the part with the eye, there was some mummified remains and some beds to protect 6 from the light, while here we have to sneak using a totally different route. This is the first sign that we might not be going through the maw at the same time as 6. What I love about this part of the chapter is how it explains and expands upon some of the things we might have wondered about in the first game. For example, as we are following a little shadowy girl who seems to be running away from us for some reason, we see her make a rope out of sheets, which we later use as 6 in her campaign. I wish this section lasted just a bit longer, because it's cool to see how these 2 completely different stories are dependent on each other and how we influence the other world for the other character. But this chase really lasts a couple of minutes maybe, before we are left with no other option than to jump into this weird hall, which leads us to Secrets of the Maw relies on a couple of gimmicks, and this is where the first one starts. By now we know that we are on a ship, and we had one section in the main game where 6 was waist deep in shoes, with a monster underneath it trying to catch her. It was a really small section that was a nice addition to the game, but definitely could have been expanded upon, and here we are. This entire chapter from now on happens way deeper into the maw, and is all about water. Again, I have to praise the design of how we are introduced to water physics and the new mechanics in this level. Immediately, we are thrown into deep water. Then we walk through some shallow water, so now we know that there are levels to this. In the next room, we get a flashlight, which also is similar to 6, but she had a lighter. This DLC is really good at repackaging older mechanics and giving them just a little twist. With the flashlight, for example, we can scope around the room and light up different areas, which we could not do in the base game. In the next room, we are faced with the first real enemy of the chapter, the leeches. Remember how I said in my previous video that they were easy to avoid and not really that threatening? Well, this DLC fixes that and makes them extremely deadly. The leeches, for being such a minor character, are given a lot to do in this chapter. We start the level by having a real chase with them, because they are only slow on the ground. While in water, well, in water, the leeches are faster than the player, so you cannot outrun them. Instead, you have to trick them or hop over them to survive, which is something new to the series. It is also heavily implied that one of the leeches killed the little girl we saw at the beginning of the chapter. We first find her flashlight, then we see some black marks on the ground and the door, and after the chase, we see her footsteps and abruptly where a leech is placed. For being such a minor inconvenience in the first game, the first couple of minutes from the depths really fleshes out these creatures. They are more deadly, involve more interesting gameplay, pose an actual threat both in the game and in the story, so much so that one of the crucial plot characters dies from them. And it's not even the last time we see them in this chapter either. After another room that makes us comfortable with the water, we have our first encounter with the monster. From the very beginning, we knew that there will be something trying to pull us under the water, let's not kid ourselves. But I really enjoy how the game doesn't immediately shows us the enemy. At first, instead showing only bubbles and teaching us the basics of how it works. Next, we have one of the few puzzles involving raising and lowering water levels. They are not that complicated, but if you play them for the first time and don't know what you're doing, it might take you a couple of tries and might take you a bit longer. It's also worth looking around some of the less obvious routes, whenever there are any, because they'll usually lead you to a secret collectible. This time, the runaway kid is not collecting gnomes or statues, instead he opens these bottles with some lights in them. There are 5 of them in each of the level in the DLC, and in the depths they are hidden moderately well. But guys, let's not kid ourselves. This is all just filler and bonus content for the main course, that is the sections with the monster of this chapter. Having to slowly swim to the nearest walkable point while a fast and dangerous creature bolts towards you underwater is pretty anxiety inducing. I especially love the moment of realization that most players will have when they are standing on something solid, watching the monster move around it, and after a while it will knock you down into the water, which is a real shocker for the first time you play this chapter, and adds just that little bit of terror and skill. You have to be quick on your feet and constantly move forward, or else you're in danger. This also means that in the sections with the monster, basically no part of the ground is safe, which is also just kind of frightening. Throughout this level, we also learn a couple of things about the monster and are introduced into some new mechanics involving it. For example, it loves eating meat and fish, which the kid uses to distract it and gain distance. We are now about halfway through the chapter, and there's one mechanic left that I've yet to show you. After another puzzle with changing the water level, and then avoiding some leeches, we run into this room. It's another very simple puzzle involving electricity and water. You have to drain the room, move the platforms so you can jump to the other side, and then raise the water level. If you fall into the water, you get electrocuted. Simple as that. But I feel like this might come in handy later. Okay, let's move on to the next room. Now, what the fuck was that? So this is another room with a water monster in it, and it's the first time we get a glimpse into how she looks. Yeah, it's a she. Girls can be monsters too. Now that we saw her, I can start saying her real name, which is the Granny. She is the main antagonist of this chapter. This section really starts to test our knowledge of how she works, because there are platformer elements, some dead fish for distraction, and this section can take a couple of tries on the first playthrough. Next is another puzzle, and that's just all stuff that we've seen before in some other areas of the MOA. So I'd rather talk about the way this level is designed, and honestly, I don't know how to feel about it, so I'm happy to read your opinions on it. The structure of this chapter is pretty standard. There are really only 3 types of rooms in this chapter: filler rooms, puzzle rooms, and sections with the Granny. Obviously, the most interesting are the ones with the monster chasing us, or even with the leeches, which provide some kind of a challenge. Then there might be a small tunnel or a room that you have to walk through, and then there is a puzzle that takes about 2 minutes to solve. Then it's back to the monster room. I haven't really noticed it that much while playing, but now that I'm writing this video and looking at the footage, I'm seeing how formulaic it's all set up. A granny section, then a filler room, then a puzzle, and a granny section again. I am not saying that it's bad, it's just something that I noticed. Now, one thing I have to praise about this chapter is, just before the game would get stale, it's time for the final boss fight. The reveal of the granny is just a chef's kiss, and the platforming sections are spiced up a bit, which I really appreciate. We turn on the electricity and get one of the coolest shots in this chapter, of the granny just wrecking the ground beneath us, leaving us with nothing to stand on and having to jump into the water with her. It is also very convenient that in the same room there's a plugged TV, showcasing the same channel as it did with the janitor in the main game. The granny is desperately trying to break the platform, but before she knows it, it's too late. This is the defining moment of the chapter, and the coolest visual, in my opinion. After that, there's only one room left. It has a staircase and a ladder that leads us to... And well, this is where the chapter ends. The Runaway Kid's story is only getting started though, and it only goes downhill from here. So be sure to check out my next reviews to see what happens. For now, it's time for... This video won't be as long as my previous one. I won't have a whole other section just for theories, because the lore here is not that deep, pun intended. We are going through a small part of the mall from the original game and are pretty much setting up the level for 6 in the future. With that finale, seeing each other in cages and all, we now know that these two stories are intertwined and are happening at the same time in different parts of the world. Apart from that, we learn that the janitor is not that bad of a guy, and that the mall is much bigger and it has a whole other world hidden much deeper than we thought. Apart from that, we don't know why the granny is kept alive down in the sewers. Compared to the janitor or the chefs, she doesn't seem to be a worker for this big machine. There aren't any real big lore drops, at least for now, at least in this chapter. Now, from the gameplay standpoint, this DLC is a really nice addition to the main game. The controls are familiar, but are a bit expanded upon. The puzzles are very simple and won't take too much of your time, but are varied enough that they are just fun breaks from the chases with the granny, and the granny herself is a really cool enemy. It's not reinventing the wheel or anything, but again, why should it be? For a pretty small price, you get about 30 or 40 minutes of a new chapter, with some cool new visuals, a bit of a lore drop, and some new mechanics. Also, at the time of release, there wasn't as much Little Nightmares content as there is now, so I can also imagine how exciting it was to see another part of the mall and for the first time ever play as a completely new character in the franchise. This is why I can't hate on this DLC, but why I also feel like I've said everything there is to it in this video. It's just a fun hour of gameplay and a nice addition to the main title. Just like this video. Now, having said all of that, do I have something to add? No.